What do you mean Ryan will be CEO? I'm the one who saved this hotel. My voice echoed through the newly renovated lobby, bouncing off the modern, mountain-inspired decor I had spent months perfecting. Mom waved her hand dismissively, as if I were overreacting. Claire, honey, your brother has more natural leadership ability. You're too detail-oriented, she said, her voice calm but firm, like she was explaining something to a child. Then Ryan walked in, hands in his pockets, wearing that smug smile I had seen since we were kids. Hey, sis, don't take it personally. Someone needs to handle the day-to-day stuff while I focus on the bigger picture. My name is Claire Anderson, and at 52 years old, I never imagined I would be fighting for recognition in my own family's business. After 2 decades of success in hotel management in Chicago, I gave up everything to return home to Colorado and save our struggling family hotel. The irony? I was the only one with actual hospitality experience. Meanwhile, my younger brother Ryan had spent years bouncing between jobs, never sticking with one for more than a year. Coming home to a failing business. 8 months ago, Dad called me in tears, saying the hotel was weeks away from bankruptcy. I didn't hesitate. I sold my condo in Chicago, cashed in my savings, and came home to help. What I found was heartbreaking. The Mountain Pine Lodge, once a proud family business, was stuck in the past. The decor was outdated, the reservation system was ancient, and the reviews online were brutal. Stuck in the past, needs major updating, not worth the price. I knew what had to be done. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. The first month was all about damage control, fixing broken equipment, updating the booking system, and training staff on proper customer service. I negotiated with suppliers, replaced the lobby's worn-out furniture, and revamped our social media presence. The transformation was incredible. Bookings doubled, revenue soared, and guests raved about the improvements. I even leveraged my industry connections to get us featured in a major travel magazine. But none of that mattered, not to my parents, at least, because now, despite all my hard work, they were handing the CEO position to Ryan. Ryan, the leader. Ryan was 3 years younger than me and had never shown real interest in the hotel business. While I studied hospitality management in college, he hopped between majors, first architecture, then business, before dropping out entirely. Mom and Dad never seemed worried. He's just creative, they would say. He needs time to figure things out. Meanwhile, I was building a successful career, working my way up from front desk manager to regional director at a major hotel chain. But no matter what I achieved, my family barely acknowledged it. That's nice, dear, but when are you coming home? When are you getting married? Nothing was ever enough. When I returned to save the hotel, Ryan was nowhere to be found. He was off in Denver, networking, which mostly meant partying. Occasionally, he would show up for family dinners, throw out vague suggestions, and then disappear again. But somehow, in my parents' eyes, his occasional input was just as valuable as my daily grind. The breaking point. For 3 weeks after Ryan was named CEO, I watched him make reckless decisions. He slashed costs in all the wrong places, ignoring the systems I had put in place. Just last week, he cut the hotel's popular continental breakfast service to save money, not realizing that our breakfast ratings were one of our biggest selling points. When I tried to show him guest satisfaction data, he laughed. Numbers aren't everything, sis. Then came the final straw. This morning, I walked in to find him firing Maureen, our head of housekeeping. She had been with us for 15 years. His reason? She wasn't flexible enough about his new scheduling system, one that would have left us dangerously understaffed during peak checkout times. I managed to intervene and save her job, but the humiliation on her face was devastating. That afternoon, I tried to talk to Mom and Dad, showing them spreadsheets, guest reviews, and financial projections. Dad stared at his coffee. Mom patted my hand. Claire, you need to give your brother time to find his footing. He has such wonderful ideas. That's when I saw it, the for sale sign on the old Riverside Lodge while driving home. It had been our main competitor for years before closing last season. I pulled into the parking lot, my mind racing. The property had potential, better views, closer to the ski slopes, and a bigger spa area. It needed work, but I knew exactly how to bring it back to life. I sat in my car for almost an hour, thinking about every time my parents had overlooked me in favor of Ryan, every achievement dismissed, every suggestion ignored. every contribution minimized. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it snapped, maybe it finally clicked into place. I called my realtor. The owners were eager to sell, and thanks to my savings and stellar credit rating, I could make it happen. By the time I drove home, I had already scheduled a viewing for the next morning. For the first time in months, I felt energized, excited, even. I wouldn't have to watch Ryan destroy everything I had built. Instead, I would build something new, something that was completely mine. Let them see what they gave up when they chose him over me. I first fell in love with hospitality when I was a child. Growing up in the halls of Mountain Pine Lodge, I watched my parents greet guests with warm smiles, listened to the hum of conversations in the lobby, and helped out whenever I could. I loved the feeling of creating a space where people felt welcome and comfortable. That passion carried me into adulthood, shaping my career and leading me to where I am today. The crowd at the Colorado Luxury Hotels Awards shifted uncomfortably when I spoke, catching the subtle meaning behind my words. But it was the conversation afterward that truly changed everything. A renowned travel magazine editor approached me for an interview. As we talked about the summit's success, I noticed my parents standing nearby, listening intently. They heard every word as I described my journey, how I had been overlooked for the CEO position at Mountain Pine Lodge, and how that rejection had fueled my determination to create something of my own. Sometimes the best success stories come from being underestimated, I said, making sure my voice carried. That evening, the editor shared more surprising news. Their upcoming issue would name the summit the best boutique hotel in the Rockies. That same issue would also include an article about traditional hotels struggling to adapt, with Mountain Pine Lodge as the prime example. When the article was published, it was as if a bomb had gone off in our small town. People who once whispered that I was being spiteful were forced to acknowledge the truth. I had built something extraordinary, while Mountain Pine Lodge was failing, not because of me, but because of the choices my parents had made. Looking back, I felt a mix of emotions. A part of me still ached from the way my parents had dismissed everything I had done, but a bigger part of me felt free. I was no longer waiting for their approval or fighting for a place in their business. I was living my life on my own terms. Each morning when I stepped into the summit, I was reminded of what I had built with my own two hands. The vibrant lobby buzzed with life, guests chatting about their plans for the day, staff moving efficiently with warm smiles, and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. It was everything I had once dreamed Mountain Pine Lodge could be. But here, it was real. Seeing my hotel thrive filled me with pride. Many of my staff had once worked at Mountain Pine Lodge, including Sarah and Maria. They had left because they, too, had seen the lack of leadership there. Their loyalty and hard work were instrumental in making the summit a success, and their dedication humbled me. Sarah often joked that for the first time, she felt like her experience and ideas were truly valued. I knew exactly how she felt. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with old friends. For years, I had been so consumed with proving myself to my parents that I had neglected important relationships. Now, I made time for coffee dates and hikes, rebuilding the connections I had let slip away. Even some of the townspeople who had initially criticized me for competing with my family admitted they admired what I had accomplished. Hosting community events at the summit helped me rebuild my place in the town. Just last month, we held a fundraiser for the local animal shelter in our new event space, and it was a huge success. Seeing people come together reminded me why I had chosen hospitality, to create spaces that bring people joy and comfort. But despite my success, there were moments, especially on quiet nights, when I thought about my parents and Ryan. As much as they had hurt me, I wished things had turned out differently. I wondered if they had ever truly understood the sacrifices I made for our family's business. But I had come to realize that I no longer needed their recognition to feel whole. My success, my happiness, they were mine, and no one could take them away. Then, about 3 weeks after the awards ceremony, my parents reached out. They invited me to dinner, just the three of us. I hesitated but eventually decided to go. I wanted to hear what they had to say, though I wasn't expecting an apology. When I arrived at their house, the atmosphere felt different. My mother greeted me with a nervous smile, and my father avoided eye contact, fiddling with his watch like he always did when he was uncomfortable. Over dinner, they made small talk, how the weather was unusually warm, how they had read about the summit's latest 5-star review. I could tell they were building up to something. Finally, my father cleared his throat and said, "Clara, we wanted to say we're proud of what you've accomplished." My mother quickly added, "We know we haven't always shown it, but we do recognize how much work you've put in. The summit is remarkable." I wanted to feel happy about their words, but they felt hollow, too little, too late. I simply nodded, waiting for what I knew was coming next. Sure enough, my mother sighed and said, "Ryan's struggling, the hotel isn't doing well, and he's in over his head. We were wondering if you could maybe guide him, help us get things back on track." I sat there for a long moment, letting their words hang in the air. My mother's manicured nails clutched her wine glass a little too tightly, and my father studied the tablecloth as if it held the answers to their problems. "I offered to help a year ago," I finally said, my voice steady but firm. "I gave up my life in Chicago to save Mountain Pine Lodge. You chose to put Ryan in charge, even though you knew he wasn't ready. You didn't want my leadership then, and now that things have fallen apart, you're asking me to step in. I'm sorry, but I can't do that." My mother opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I'm willing to give you advice, strategies, supplier recommendations, training programs for your staff, but I'm not coming back to fix what Ryan has broken. That's not my responsibility anymore." For once, my parents were silent. My father muttered something about understanding my position, though his disappointment was clear. My mother looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Driving home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Setting that boundary was difficult, but it was necessary. I wasn't going to sacrifice my success, my happiness, to clean up their mess. I was finally choosing myself. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a shift in myself. Saying no to my parents gave me the confidence to enforce boundaries in other areas of my life. 2. I stopped over-explaining my decisions, stopped seeking validation from people who would never truly appreciate me. I focused on the relationships that brought me joy and fulfillment. The summit continued to flourish. Our occupancy rates were the highest in the region, and other boutique hotel owners even started reaching out for consulting advice. Meanwhile, Mountain Pine Lodge struggled. I heard through the grapevine that they had finally hired a professional consultant to try to turn things around. Ryan and I barely spoke, and I was okay with that. He never apologized, never acknowledged what had happened, but I no longer needed him to. His resentment was his burden to carry, not mine. The summit was a reflection of everything I had worked for, my resilience, my vision, my independence, and as it thrived, so did I.